Welcome. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Aya Shasha'a, and I am the Vice President for Societal Impact at Udacity. For those of you not familiar with Udacity, Udacity is an education technology company that is focused on its mission of training the world's workforce in the careers of the future. Today, we're upskilling 20 million learners in over 190 countries, where we partner directly with large corporations across the world, such as Shell, Amazon Web Services, STC, Etisalat, and others, to enable them to pursue their digital transformation journeys. We also partner with governments and foundations to equip their citizens with the skills required for national digital transformations and national competitiveness. Before I introduce our esteemed panelists, I'd like to spend some time setting some context for why we're gathered here today to discuss the topic of building a future-proof talent ecosystem in the Middle East. The talent shortage has reached a crisis point globally, and the Middle East is no stranger to that. We are past the skills gap, and we have entered a skills crisis. According to the World Economic Forum, by 2025, which is only 3 years from today, 85 million jobs will be displaced and 97 million new jobs will be created. This trend has been further accelerated by COVID by an estimated 5 to 10 years. Not having the right skills hampers national digital transformations, economic competitiveness, and sadly, social inclusion. The traditional educational system, which many of us had experienced up till today, has not transformed in any significant way since the Industrial Revolution, making it one of the few sectors that's been static for over 200 years. Hence, we know it is not designed to accommodate this rapid change and rapid pace of innovation. An interesting fact is that the half-life of professional skills was once estimated at 10 to 15 years. Today, the half-life of a learned skill is estimated to be 5 years and even shorter for technical skills, meaning that a skill that you learn today will be half as valuable in 5 years or less. This is further exacerbated by societal challenges and societal changes that have taken place over the past decades. Unemployment is extremely high across the world, and in the MENA region is estimated at 25%. Female youth is particularly high in Arab states, where 1 in 3 females are unemployed. Reliance on tech exports, including talent, is a real challenge, with a high brain drain. 95% of Arab students who study abroad choose not to go back to their own home countries. We have an extremely low spend on R&D, with an average spend of around 0.49% compared to 3 to 5% in the top 5 countries. We also are facing systematic barriers such as literacy rates, gender inequality, and digital infrastructure access challenges. All of these facts reflect that it is a critical time for us now to do some moonshot thinking as a collective ecosystem. That includes our civil societies, the private sector, and the public sector, and not one without the other. We must transition out of a siloed approach to skill development to a more talent-centric ecosystem collaborative approach. According to Steve Jobs, innovation is the ability to see change as an opportunity and not as a threat. Today, we're honored to be joined by 4 innovators in their field who are thought leaders that have made strides to address this challenge from very different angles. Without further ado, I'd love to introduce our panelists who are here with us today. First, Dr. Sonia bin Jafar, the Chief Executive Officer at Abdullah Al Ghureir Foundation for Education, which is one of the largest privately funded philanthropic education initiatives in the Arab world, with the purpose of empowering Emirati and Arab youth through education so they can thrive and contribute to the development of the region. Dr. Sonia is an experienced strategic leader dedicated to helping key stakeholders become better at having a collective positive impact on education for improved livelihoods. She's cultivated partnerships that help achieve the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, focused on education and talent ecosystem. She holds a PhD in theory and policy studies from the University of Toronto. Welcome, Dr. Sonia. I'd also like to welcome Daria Shulipova, who is a partner and head of talent acquisition at Growth Levers, focused on helping startups and tech companies attract and hire top talent. She specializes in tech and digital recruitment and is based in Dubai. Prior to her entrepreneurial venture, Daria acted as an in-house recruiter as well as managing talent acquisition teams. Her claims to fame are hunting the finest talent for 30 tech startups, including Kareem, Tajawal, and others that are becoming more and more prominent in the region. Welcome, Daria. Our third panelist is Dr. Amar Al-Husseini, who is currently the Deputy Director General of the Central Agency for Information Technology, CATE, in Kuwait. This is the IT operational arm of the government of Kuwait. Before joining CATE, he was the CIO and an assistant professor in computer engineering at Kuwait University and Director General of the Information Center at the Kuwait Ministry of Education. He has built extensive experience in digital skills. Dr. Amar holds a master's and PhD in computer engineering from the University of Southern California, and I am honored to have him join us today. Dr. Abdulrahman Al-Habib represents SADAYA, the Saudi Data and Artificial Intelligence Authority, where he's the general manager for talent development at the National Center for Artificial Intelligence. He's an assistant professor at the University of North Texas and has a PhD in information science and data science with tons of scientific publications and presentations generated over the last 10 years. Without further ado, I will get us started with questions to our panelists who we are here to listen and hear from. So I'd like to start with Dr. Sonia. We claim, or many claim, and I share that perspective, that we're in the midst of a skill crisis. What's your view on the severity of this skills gap facing the Middle East and the GCC in particular, especially as related to future skills?
Well, I do think that it it is particularly grievous here, but it is a global challenge. We're experiencing rapid changes in how we operate globally. It's not just here. And you alluded to it with regards to the half-life of the new skills. The technology of today, whether it's AI or looking through what the metaverse is going to mean for us, how we're going to assure security within these new modalities, what that's going to look like. It's all demanding a rapid growth in skills demand. And as soon as you learn a skill, it feels like you've got to learn a new one, right? It just it feels like it's moving so fast, and so the pace of the change just feels like it's the challenge globally. And so in the Middle East, we have a youthful market. Whose skills are simply not what the market is demanding, and we're not keeping up with the pace of change. And so what that translates to is a human capital issue that we've always had, but now it feels like it's a human capital issue on steroids. We've landed in this place where if we want economic growth and we want to move that sustainably forward, we have got to manage this particular situation and helping youth, work from anywhere and manage to help them keep their skills sharp. Um, you know, Yesterday I was with the AUB steering committee for the Abdullah Al Hurer hub for digital teaching and learning, and we had Microsoft there, and we had Accenture there, and we had people from kind of who are on the edge of this, and they were talking about the shortage of cybersecurity talent in the U.S. Now, why couldn't that be satisfied by Arab talent here? Because you don't actually have to physically be there for everything. And so, how are we going to take those long strides for digital human capital in a place where we still have quite a high unemployment rate? So, I do think that we have a skills gap, um, that we do need to invest very specifically with regards to the market. If you look at the GCC region, 16% of employers don't feel that the curricula, is really aligned, or sorry, feel that the curricula is aligned. That's very, very, very few of them. So we definitely have almost the global issue, but magnified just because we have that youth bulge and a history on top of which we have the conflict, and we have the issues with the digital divide, and we have the issues with the education divide. And so it's almost like magnifying, and now if we don't do something about it, that crisis is going to send those kids further back.
Thank you so much. Very relevant. I'm curious to hear Dr. Ammar's perspectives on what Dr. Sonia just talked about in terms of the skills crisis, and maybe hearing it from your perspective in Kuwait, right? Obviously, these countries are different. They have different dynamics. There are some similarities, but some differences. What is your view on the skills crisis in Kuwait, and how much progress have we made, maybe kind of taking Kuwait as an example in this case, versus where we need to be able to achieve the goals we want to achieve?
Thank you very much, Aya. Actually, after the shocking fact you started with your introduction about, I think we all agree about the crisis. So even now we are not talking about the gap, we're talking about the crisis. And Kuwait is no like stranger or the other countries, especially in the Middle East. I think we all share the same challenges, the same crisis. Maybe it's in the size will be differ a little bit. But the question, like, since we all agree about the crisis, how big is the crisis, like in Kuwait or in UAE or different countries? This is a very important question. I don't think we have authentic study or like some reliable source about how big is the crisis. In order to deal with any crisis, either reactively or proactively, which is like something we are looking for, you need to identify how big is the crisis. So, and that's mean we need to clearly identify the market needs and our target state. So this is like we need to put our goal about how many like skills we need in each like market, and then we starting from the current state and start bridging the gap in those skills. And talking about IT, since we are like responsible about digital skills in Kuwait, it's even worse because the emerging tech and the fast pace of an IT industry, you cannot find easily any like skills, especially with those working as Daria who are headhunting our best employees. We cannot compete as a government with a private sector or oil sector. So this is even the crisis is worst in the government sector in Kuwait, and I think the region also share the same. So with the fast pace of IT industry, so digital skills is maybe the most like we are facing in the crisis now. So my point is like we need to identify the gap or the crisis, how big. We need to identify the current state and the target state, which is we need each country, we need to identify the skill sets needed for its strategic plan, digital transformation plan. Then they need to work hard on making sure within their ecosystem to make sure that those skills will be available at the time. We all agree that's like it's really difficult to find all the skills we need, especially we at the government sector. We cannot win in the headhunting. So I think we only need to rely on reskilling and upskilling. We like considering now upskilling, but what about reskilling? Are the culture like the employees will accept transferring from admin job to the IT job? I don't think so. Are the requirement and the procedure within the civil services commission accepting this, putting the right incentive for those will be reskilled to fill the gap? There are many challenges. On the other hand, we need to work in partnership with all vendor, private sector and government sector to fill this gap. And maybe this is something we can elaborate more, Aya, after like we hear from other panelists.
Completely agree. I'd like to turn over to a different perspective. Daria has been involved in placing talent, mostly digital or tech talent, at startups in the region. We do know that we have a large youth bulge in this region, and we are trying to create new jobs, a lot of which should come from new companies and new innovative employers. Even large traditional companies are trying to stay competitive, and in that context have become digital themselves, be it banks or retailers or telecommunication companies. So this is all really part of their evolution, digitize to win, right? And so I'm curious to hear from Daria, and maybe some facts or statistics or thoughts on what portion of these digital jobs are filled by people who reside in countries. So by local talent, not necessarily, I mean, locals, I mean local talent, and what portion needs to be imported, and broadly, what are the most in-demand skills that you're seeing, and where is the gap relative to the local market?
Sure. From my experience hiring in the region, I would say anywhere between 60 to 70% of talent, especially when it comes to tech and digital, is imported from abroad. which is quite a big number. Reason why is because locally the competition for digital and tech talent is fierce. And because the local talent is quite scarce, there is no, it needs to be developed. So companies that want to hire locally, they have to pay the top of the budget to be able to attract this talent. So in this case, it makes more sense for the companies, especially early stage technology companies, to tap into the bigger pool of talent internationally and relocate them to the region. Especially now, the region became much more attractive, in a couple of years since COVID, because everyone's seen how, for example, UAE managed COVID and how well it was managed versus, other countries. And especially that tax-free regulations are still quite attractive for some people who are relocating from abroad. Now, another rising trend that I'm seeing right now, specifically within the region, is companies in GCC are hiring teams remotely from other MENA countries. So tapping into this plus minus 3 hour talent pool and plus minus 3 hours geography. So, which is great because then the rest of MENA talent is also developing and entering the workforce and participating in the ecosystem, etc. So that would be my answer. Now, to answer the second question, which is what are the most in-demand skills in the Middle East right now, and what are what are we really struggling to hire, and all the tech companies are really struggling to hire in the region, I could definitely say the top skill would be software engineering. It's always, because in order for a company to be able to build a tech product, they need, multiple engineers. I mean, need only one designer, but they still need multiple engineers. So generally, we need engineers are always a scarce skill. And the reason why, because we don't have strong local schools that teach software engineering very well. And second is because most of the companies prefer to hire experienced engineers that already built similar products before. And considering that we didn't have a talent tech ecosystem and startup ecosystem just 10, 15 years ago, the companies prefer to poach someone who has done it and built something else elsewhere. Second, skills that are in demand, I would say the bucket. I would say this product management and product design, just because, again, we didn't have product-based companies just 10 years ago, and now we're just very catching up with the rest of the world. And the third bucket, I would say, is digital marketing, data analytics, and growth. So these are very tough roles to hire for right now in the region. So we have to most likely to headhunt from anywhere else. Now, when it comes to country by country, what I can definitely say from my experience is that UAE has the most talent and the most developed ecosystem in Middle East, followed by Saudi, Egypt, and Jordan. Saudi and Jordan are actually accelerating towards becoming their own talent magnet hub that we haven't seen maybe 3-4 years ago. So that's what I'm seeing in the market in terms of the trends.
Fantastic. Before I get into the ecosystem engagement component, which I know was part of the discussion, I'd like to hear maybe from Dr. Sonia and Dr. Ammar a little bit of maybe what are your learnings from programs that you've implemented over the last couple of years? And maybe you can use one as an example or summarize more broadly on the things that work and the things that don't work in terms of us being able to actually upskill in these kind of skills that are the skills of the future, these skills that are demanded at the right quantity and speed, right? I think that is kind of the biggest challenge, right? So maybe Dr. Sonia, we can start off with you. What are your thoughts on that? And are there maybe examples that you'd like to share?
Sure, thank you. I mean, the foundation has been around since 2015, and we have definitely had a very strategic shift where we're looking at that scalability of market-driven support for youth. And I think that one of the pieces that we have been very successful in is really that outreach and finding the voice of the youth so that they can tell us where their hurt points are. And now we're starting to marry that to industry needs. So we have the Young Thinkers program. It was designed specifically for kind of the future facing skills for helping Emiratis first and foremost, and then Arabs across the 22 states. And we had the privilege of working with the Ministry of Human Resources and Amortization. We had the support of Arizona State University. And this to me is a foundational piece for our success, because what we've done with this particular platform is we started with what it was that they didn't know in terms of how to understand the market. And this is something that in this particular region is jarring. To the degree that it's surprising for somebody who's not from this region to understand to what degree there is no too little to just poorly done, discombobulated career counseling and guidance and advising. You know, unless you have the good fortune of being from a family or having an entrepreneur who happens to be in the right market space, advise you well when you are in that kind of that vulnerable space, you're kind of just going to whatever it is that you think might be good, or you want to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer, because that's like the trilogy, you know, those are the ones. And trying to explain that actually data analytics is something that's going to take you through all the way to being a CEO if you need to be, because you have to be able to understand how to visualize data and make sense of it and make decisions, right? From a technical piece all the way to that, that's something that is simply not out there. And that's what the Young Thinkers program is all about. And that was one of the key components. We then took that and married it to looking at this digital upskilling piece. And that came with our No Moo program, and in particular Tech Up, which we are working with Udacity, where we've committed to upskilling 20,000 Emiratis. And we've had our first cohort, and we have over 100 of them going into a nano degree now. One of them is looking at how to use data and data visualization, because we actually didn't launch right away. And I think that this is a big piece. Before launching, we actually did industry work. And I don't mean just finding out what industry needs, which Dr. Amar, you made an extremely important point earlier, which is industry needs to kind of stop complaining and whining and give us some data on what it was that was needed. And so that's what we did. We went to them and said, listen, you've been complaining for a very long time. What do you predict you're going to need in the next 3 to 5 years? That's the talent that we're going to try and build for you, but then you hire them. So making that link and working through, that's what the foundation is doing the most, is really working on building a closer bridge. And I think that that was the part that has been missing the most. I don't think that the youth are at all any lazier than anywhere else in the world or less motivated. In fact, if anything, I find them to be incredibly motivated, very hungry, but just unable to figure out how to get there. And that's what our programs have been able to help them do. I'm sure Dr. Amar has another example.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sera. That's really very like creative. For us, like I'll have example within the government sector, like especially with the COVID, it's influenced the way we deliver training. And with the digital transformation as the buzzword, everybody talking about digital transformation. And one of the most important technology enabler for digital transformation is cloud computing. So cloud requires many different skills. It's not only like developers, it's like cybersecurity, like even sizing engineer, etc. So we realized that we will go heavily migrating to cloud, and with different hyperscalers providing different services, that's add more challenging to understand the cost model, the services, platform as service provided by each hyperscaler. So what we did, we partnership with most hyperscalers and provide training for Kuwaitis within government sector, and it was open also for those who waiting for the jobs to be participating in those initiatives to get Kuwaiti employee and Kuwaiti youth certified in cloud computing. And we insisted on having certification-based training. So our KPI is to get how many will be certified based on the official certification. And honestly, the main challenge, since there is no official enforcement linked to the like incentive money or like upgrading the level of the employee. It's also mostly depends on the incentive within the person for his own like career path or etc. Or we always, I say this in any introduction for any cohort, that please do this to find a better place than the government. So use us to learn and go find somewhere else. So this is the only thing I can give as motivation to, because at the end we not lose, since if all Kuwaiti help in the government sector or the private sector. So what we saw that there are many challenges related to the certification-based program. First, the delivery model, like mixing face-to-face. We get used to the face-to-face, going to the hotel, having coffee breaks, and collaborating with other learners. That's something that used to be a very good incentive for government employees to participate on the training courses. Now, with the online, that's totally not an incentive. Why? Because still the procedure within the government, they will not give the employee off for the online learning, especially for the self-paced. Totally, your boss will assume that you are totally on the job. You need to do everything while do the training. That's impossible. So after working hour, who would need to do this? There is no else, until only self motivation is the only thing we are using now. This is a very big challenge. We need to change this. We need to change the way we look at the training, especially the hybrid one. The second challenge, and I want to like summarize with this, is like, what's the incentive to be given for the employees to finish the certification? The passing percentage did not pass 25% on all more than 10 big initiatives we did with the most hyperscalers and most tech companies. Because there is nothing like, it's like very challenging. Exams are not always easy. They need extra hours to be put for preparing for the exam. So what's the better way to measure the KPI, the return on investment of the training? Only attendance? That's totally not useful. Trying to measure the on-job experience, that's even difficult. So maybe we use the certification as one indicator, which is the best available now, but that's also a very big challenge to see the percentage pass rate on the certification program. That's like an example I think we faced and we learned a lot about.
Very insightful. Thank you both for sharing. So, I mean, so we're saying kind of in summary, there's a skill crisis, but there's actually a lot that we're experimenting with and learning with to figure out how we're going to solve and address some of these challenges. And be it blended learning or other kind of tactics that you've mentioned as learnings from your different programs. I think I'd be curious and to understand from like a talent specialist who's responsible for tech recruiting. What do you look for when you look for these candidates, right? So you have Dr. Amar and Dr. Sonia who are working on kind of trying over the next, they've been doing it for a while, but I think over the next couple of years, accelerate their efforts and their initiatives around creating digital talent and talent more broadly, but also future talent in the spaces that you've described, be it digital marketing or cloud or others, right? So when you look for someone, what are you looking for today? And what can we do for you to start looking differently so that you can start identifying these individuals who graduate from their programs?
I see. Okay. So one thing to note is that the majority of tech and digital talent that we hire for are experienced talent, right? Between someone who's not experienced versus, fresh grad, even though they have 10 certifications, versus someone who has already experience, any employer would go for the one that has experience, especially that it's so easy to move talent to the region. So this is what's happening. So when we're talking about fresh graduates, it's very difficult for them to get in, and I can see that because now how to solve this and how to make it easier, right? I can tell you what has worked for us in my experience hiring in this region. So we in my previous organization, we've created our own talent accelerator program because we knew exactly what we need and what kind of skill set we need to develop. So we launched the program, provided 10-week on-job training, and then absorbed them into the organization. It proved to be really, really successful. But because we knew we had resources and we knew exactly what we want, right? Now, when it comes to other, how else we hire fresh graduates, the mostly is attitude, and yes, certifications will definitely help. But the thing is, me hiring for 99% of the time I'm hiring in the private sector, we're not even aware of the initiatives that are being done. So that's another thing. So I'm sure, I think if we would be aware of this, tech startups or companies would be aware of these initiatives, they would definitely prefer it. But they just there's not information. They don't know about them. And another thing what really helped us when it comes to partnering with government entities, at least my personal experience, that was really good. When we needed to hire Saudi graduates in Saudi, but part of the nationalization program. And we partnered with Human Resources Development Fund, and they provided exactly the same amazing caliber of talent. And not only they provided really good talent and they're organized and etc., they also subsidize private companies of hiring national talent, and they follow up and they support and they make sure that they're actually they're happy with the services. Because oftentimes, even if I go to, for example, we want to hire a fresh graduate, we go to universities because this is the most logical way, right? You want to hire a fresh grad, you go to university, tell them, hi guys, we want to hire, this is a profile, and they send us 50 CVs and none of them are not, it's not gonna, it just doesn't work this way. So ideally, in my opinion, what universities need to do, and first is they need to work on upgrading their curriculum and partnering with companies so graduates already have some kind of on-job training experience by the time they graduate. So this is one. And what governments and public entities can do, they can incentivize and partner with the private sector in a better way, so private sector actually is aware that these programs exist and they can utilize them. So I hope this answered this question.
Very, very insightful. I wish I was a panelist, but I'm not. So these are really amazing ways and very practical ways in which you, as someone who is on the private sector side, who's really, really close to the talent problem, see could be helpful to bridge this ecosystem, right? I think we all, we've been doing this for a couple of years in the region as Udacity, and one of the things that we've observed is how siloed these different initiatives are. As of today, it hasn't been extremely problematic because there's so much demand, but at one point coordination is needed to drive these outcomes that we require. And so I'm curious to hear maybe from Dr. Sonia, who I know is a massive proponent and kind of a thought leader in bringing together individuals in the ecosystem. That's how I've actually personally met her. I'm curious to understand your perspective on how the private sector, public sector, foundation space, government space should be collaborating to allow us to kind of leapfrog. And we know that the sector is more immature, it's more nascent, it's more new, there's a youth bulge, but we can't take our sweet time, we need to expedite. So what are your thoughts on how we could do this?
Thank you. I think Daria I was smiling when she was talking because I was like, wow, it's like she's in my head or I'm in hers. I don't know. We're both in each other's spaces. It's amazing to me how siloed it still is. And I've been working so hard for so long on the sustainability framework. And when you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, which is kind of my foundation, you know that the Partnership for the Goals, SDG 17, is that underlying linchpin that if we don't have that, we're not harmonizing the system. And until you harmonize it, we will not go to scale. It just won't happen. We'll keep on having these pockets of excellence and hoping that one day we can scale it, but the reality is we're not scaling until we harmonize, and that means all of us have to kind of find our own humility and say, okay, I don't know it all, but I know this tiny little piece. What do you know that I don't know? And can you tell me how I can do better? And I think that that's probably where a lot of our success in the last couple of years has occurred. We have been working very closely with government. I cannot be more grateful to the UAE government for setting up the policy frameworks that they have been setting up to push group HRs to actually get out of the way of youth and the way of these new graduates, and to actually make room for local talent in a very real way, so that the loopholes that have been used, or I've actually this last week I was dealing with a group HR person who said it's just cheaper for me to pay the fines. I don't want to. I know, Daria. I know, but the reality is that was what was said, and I just thought to myself, you know what? You're not a company that I want to deal with, because you need to shift into the 21st century, right? That is not a sustainable solution. You are not serving the communities that you benefit from. This is not okay, period. And I love that we're in a new era where we have this youth bulge that rejects that that ideation. And I love that we're in an era, you know, as Dr. Amar was talking about the incentivization piece for study leave. The new labor laws that just came out, I think 2 months ago in the UAE, or 1 month ago, just a few weeks ago. It's like weeks old. It's a little baby. They've just allowed for study leave, paid study leave in the labor laws. So now, you know, that idea that, oh, you're going to go study on your own and just do it on, you can actually take time off work and apply for it, and it's protected as an employee. So we have a lot of different policy frameworks coming through. That's great, but we need those group HR people to say, okay, now how do we map that together, and how do we go to academia? I couldn't agree with you more, Daria. I was just with AUB yesterday, and that was the outcome of it. How are you going to integrate experiential learning so that we can make sure that these guys leave university with some experience? And again, UAE government just announced a few weeks ago that the 8-week internship mandate has been turned into a 16-week internship mandate. And they're pushing for the private sector. So everybody's kind of scrambling, trying to understand how we're going to make this work. But I, coming from Canada, where, you know, we have the co-op program, think that it's amazing, and we should absolutely have it all the time. There's nobody who should graduate from a university without having ever stepped foot into the private sector at least once, and perhaps the public sector for a certain cadre of people as well. And until we start working together, that's not happening. But there has never been a time in the 20 years that I've been doing this where it's so ripe. Everybody is just desperate to get it done. And I think that COVID, the economic crisis, the shock of not having everything at our fingertips in 2 seconds now, with regards to the supply shocks in the economy, is and then the technological advances all at once has just made us all a little bit more vulnerable, so that we're willing to work with one another. And Daria, I'm more than willing to make sure my team gives you all of the programs that we're working with after hearing what you just said. So we'll make sure we follow up and make sure on that one. But definitely it's going to take humility, and it's going to take just, you know, saying, okay, let me step back and see who am I in my ecosystem am I not including? Why haven't I included them? And stop pointing the finger at them and saying they're not included because they don't want to be, and point the finger at myself and say, how do I make room? And so that's what we've been doing, and it's been working very well. We've been able to scale from, we're now at over 60,000 beneficiaries, young people that we've been able to help. 2 years ago, that number was half. So we've really been able to scale it up because of our partnership model. And so I totally believe in that piece there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sonia. I'd like to actually check if Dr. Habib actually has joined on audio. I believe that he was having tech difficulties, but I'd love to pose a question to him that I think links to a lot of what we're talking about. So hopefully this works. Is he there?
I can hear you very well.
Fantastic, Dr. Habib. Sorry we didn't have you with us on audio, but it would be fantastic if you can help us share your thoughts on one specific question. So when I think about SDAIA, the Saudi Data and Artificial Intelligence Authority, your mandate is massive across Saudi, and it includes both deep skilling as well as democratization of access. So how do you think in Saudi Arabia that the different ecosystems need to be involved to achieve this large target that covers both individuals who have talent as well as democratization?
I'm happy to hear the panelists earlier mentioning many things in this area. I believe that today training is democratized, and I can learn from online books or online videos or even online labs for free. And if I want to learn data and AI related skills, today that's available, readily available from many places and for free as well. But what we will need is to incentivize people or nudge them to do the training, then to finish the training, then to apply the soft skills and the hard skills together in order to find the right job. I think also the panelists mentioned earlier that also the difficulties lie into how are they going to learn within the school ecosystem, for example, or even working with a different industry. Also having the aptitude to work and ready to apply that learning within the ecosystem. This is the main challenge when we do reskilling because of the changes in the technologies and in the market. This becomes even more important, because if I work today in something that does not requires me to collaborate or work with AI systems, and you're asking me to use this new application or new software, which I might fear that this software will take my place. We perceive that many of these technologies will not take or replace the jobs as much, but it will augment and improve the efficiency of the jobs dramatically. So instead of seeing, for example, in a clinic, seeing 20 to 30 patients, you will be able to see about 100 patients, and that's a dramatic shift in the way we are using the technology. So I believe that we will need a lot of work for the incentives, a lot of work to support them to get into the workforce. Then after they get into the workforce, also a lot of work to help them reskill and shift the mindset and their understanding and perception of those technologies to a better use in their future jobs.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Habib. I'm conscious of time. I'd like to maybe just kind of do a final question to everyone on the panel to hear one last time on what is, in your view, the most important area that we need to start thinking about over the next 12 months to be able to build this talent ecosystem that is future-proof, right? That will endure the changes of technology and advancement. And I'm particularly kind of adamant about the next 12 months because there's a massive journey ahead of us, but it's always good to know where do we need to start. So I'll do the rounds again, maybe start with Daria and hear her perspective on that.
Sure. In my opinion, what we should be doing is developing junior talent because this is our future, and then retaining the existing experienced talent so they do not leave the region, because this is what eventually happens. And when it comes to companies specifically, I think companies need to think about how to offer additional learning to their employees right now and how to make it easy and how to put proper incentive in place so the current workforce actually learns. Yeah, I guess that's it. That's how I see it. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you. Dr. Sonia, what's your view on where we need to be focused over the next 12 months?
I actually think that the private sector has really stepped up, and I think governments have stepped up. But I think that we need to empower the youth now to step up, so that they find a pathway, and the only way that's going to happen is through alliances. So this notion that you can get any degree, it's okay, and then you have to just apply until somebody lets you in. We need to actually move beyond that and start those real bridges. And if we can start taking the goodwill of people and then making youth responsible for their own experiences, but supporting it at the same time. So kind of creating a little bit of pressure, but also creating a lot of support so that they get catapulted forward, really, so that they feel comfortable in their own pathway, that they've made that choice, and that they want to complete that certification that they started because they know it's going to get them somewhere. It's not just this thing I put in my CV and hope that it's going to get me an interview. I think that's the next move in the next 12 months.
Thank you, Dr. Sonia. Dr. Ammar, what are your views on that?
Yeah, I think like there is one aspect is very important. Like everything we are talking about is like it will be useless without a sponsorship from the higher level. So we need to consider the leadership, and especially when we're talking about the crisis in digital skills. So we need to focus on the digital leaders, which is what I mean by while we all in short of technical skills like cybersecurity, AI, data analytics, but we need to keep in mind all leaders within government and private sector need to understand cybersecurity, AI, IoT, metaverse, everything. So there is a part of the skilling need to be given to the leaders, regardless of their specialty or like their role or position, in order to help them take decisions and be involved. Since now everything is mixed, there is no business, no IT, it's all together. So this is a very important, very challenging to give the right amount for those leaders about all this landscape of and widescape of like IT skills. And this is really challenges. We tried this about digital transformation definition, like everybody talking about digital transformation, the whole country going into a digital transformation journey. But we noticed that every reader talk in different languages. We don't agree about specific definition of digital transformation. So what we did, we designed a workshop for government leader to identify what do we mean by digital transformation in government sector. And it was really successful. We got sponsorship from the Prime Minister, and we got 75 government leader attending this extensive workshop. So at least we have a common language now. They all talking about speaking, and this is applicable also for all other technology skills that we need to get our leaders at least aware about.
Thank you, Dr. Ammar. And Dr. Habib, if we can
Yes.
plug you back in for your final comments as well.
I will follow what Dr. Sonia, Dr. Ammar, and everyone mentioned earlier. I think that those are all important. What I will add maybe is that we need to focus on our end consumer, which is the people. We need to understand their fear, what they want, what hinder them from accepting or doing what's required. We're gonna need to nudge them here and there in order to get them to buy into adopting these technologies, buy into getting trained and reskilled, and applying those reskills with a passion in their work. At the end of the day, we need to represent our technologies that we are supporting in different areas as the helper, like what we had when we had the cars. The cars today and airplanes are helping us do marvelous things that our grandparents or maybe before that would not even imagine. Therefore, we need to put this awareness in the context and put this eagerness to use and to learn and to apply this to the people that we want them to use it. So our citizens become well educated in the benefits and became also excited to apply for it, excited to do it, excited to take the training and leave to the next level with their agencies and with their country as well.
Thank you, Dr. Habib. It seems like there's a lot on our plate in the next 12 months, from motivating our end consumers, understanding them better. That would result in what Daria kind of spoke about, which is really getting them upskilled in the areas that they want, and then kind of linking to that, building out these alliances on the private sector side that Dr. Sonia alluded to, as well as ensuring that we actually have sponsorship as a whole, that Dr. Ammar alluded to be able to facilitate kind of the collaboration of the ecosystem and the outcomes that we try to achieve as a joint unit. Thank you so much for all these perspectives. Other questions dropped off our time, so I'd like to actually open back up to the audience. I know that there were a couple of questions that were shared, and I'd like to just spend a couple of minutes asking them to our fellow panelists. There's one question for Dr. Sonia, which I'll read out. With the MENA region having the world's lowest English literacy proficiency rates, how does that impact the efficacy of your upskilling programs, especially when they're being delivered in English mainly?
Thanks for the question, because it's true. And it's not just about my my programs. They're not mine, they're ours.
Yeah,
But it's also about the fact that if you want to get certified online now, and you want to get information from the internet, most of it's in English. It's just it's the language of business today. The Arabic content is simply not as voluminous as it is in English. We actually do have that on our radar. It has been brought up, especially as we go to the more vulnerable groups. And right now, what the first level that we're dealing with are people who can be upskilled digitally with very little English support, so that they can get into that first segment of jobs. I think that there's an onus of responsibility on the education system. It can't all be on us, and this is why it's important for all of us to work together. So that's the first thing that I'm going to say. That said, we are looking at how to better support the scaffolding for English for those who do need that small top up to be able to access all of these courses. But again, it has to do with making the learner responsible for their own journey as well, and where they want to work and how they want to move forward. But that said, I would also flag that we have seen dramatic changes in the region in terms of integrating English language learning within the K through 12 system. We've seen it in Morocco. We've seen a major shift. We saw it in the GCC, and we're seeing it even more so in the UAE now, but we've already seen it. And I think that given that it is an international business language, we were in the position, agree with it or don't agree with it, right, on a fundamental kind of personal basis. When it comes to your language of business, the international language most prominently is English, and so you do want to have access to that. And like I said, we're working on thinking through how to scaffold better, but there's going to be definitely a bigger hand-holding piece for that one. And I would also I'll leave it there because I don't want to take over the entire thing, but I think that that's a very, very big one. But I definitely want to pass it to Daria to also answer this question, because if that's all right, Aya, because I
yeah.
think that Daria is in a position where she is recruiting for the region, and the language that she's recruiting in, I assume, is English. But Daria, you correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, definitely. Junior talent, especially, I wouldn't say so much in the UAE, but I would say bigger markets such as Saudi Arabia and other Kuwait. Yeah, they definitely, especially in the rural areas, we would love to hire junior talent, but they struggle with English. So it is definitely a problem, and we cannot blame the education system because they already graduated and they would like to learn English, but they probably don't have access to it. So, but I know there's great edtech startups that are coming up locally that teach English. So maybe governments could do a better job on making sure that workforce actually speaks, because this is the language of tech and digital in the end of the day, right? So that was my experience. Thank you.
I believe also that we are going into a revolution with languages and languages using artificial intelligence and specific natural language processing. What we will, I think, see in the near future, that translation became way better than today, and it will become readily available. A language might not be as a barrier as if it's today to many of the young generation going forward. We have a very good advancement today in natural language processing. Unfortunately, Arabic is not as big. However, we believe that we're gonna support and need to support further Arabic language and in different areas, in specific for natural language processing, where we will have a way better translation as we go, and it will be in real time. And we will have a lot of applications that will support and help us improve our efficiency with the language, and talking maybe multiple languages without even knowing that much details about the language itself.
Fascinating. a lot more to add on that. I'm going to try to fit in one more question for whoever has perspectives on this. Feel free to chip in, because it was not directed at anyone in specific. The question is, how do we shift the Middle Eastern youth's mindset from certifications to skills? Yeah,
I think Daria maybe the best one to comment.
I think everyone probably here has that experience.
I might try to take something about this question. I know this is really challenging, and many countries today already started doing this by allowing the internal system not to focus on certification alone. I think looking in Saudi in specific, gig economy and education and micro certification are getting more popular, getting the support from the government. The government is offering those programs as well. And we are trying to add the certification and the micro certification to the system. This will be a game changer going forward, because you don't need to attend the whole program or all the program within a university or a specific certification, but you can prove your capabilities using some badges and some maybe micro programs that have been run by different groups.
And if I allow me, Aya, to like what Dr. Habib said, I think like changing this mindset is very important, but this is the main job of the HR department, what Dr. Sonia like mentioned before. It's not about the learner. So therefore in Kuwait, for example, when we like discuss this challenge, we cannot like focus on the skills and like try to change the mindset of the learner. That's maybe it will be less challenging than the changing the mindset of the like those people responsible about setting up the government jobs and like job descriptions, because now totally it's also there is a challenge we are facing about getting even a bachelor degree from an accredited university or online degrees. This is a big challenge. So to change this to the skills mindset is really a big challenge. It's not about a learning model that will be much easier on the learner, but is the challenge we are facing within the officials responsible about setting up the HR like regulation.
I'd like to add on this. As person hiring for tech startups, I can definitely say that education has stopped being a requirement for most of the tech jobs. And what we do, we test for skills. So I think it's much easier to shift the requirements of the employers, right? So they shift their mindset of the requirements, and that this will reflect on the type of talent that is and their motivations and certifications, and they realize that skills is much more important.
Fascinating. Thank you so much, everyone. We're at the hour. I personally really enjoyed this conversation, hoping that it is the first of many other conversations that we hope to have together. We have a 12-month checkpoint with big, ambitious plans. Hopefully, we rack up to getting somewhere on all of them. Looking forward to the continued collaboration amongst each other and in the ecosystem. And have a lovely day to those who've joined us as attendees, and we will be in touch in different ways, shapes, and forms. Thank you very much.